Yeah. Too many people, huh? You know, it was funny because I brought my son there a couple of years ago. I said, did they go to the M&M store? And I heard you tried, right? You tried. Yeah, that's like the most popular. So, do you want to go back? Do you have enough? Like you're ready for the day? You would. You know, they call it exhibit. We'll get it done. What do you think that? Oh, is it too strong? Oh.
I'd volunteer work at school. I have to read it.
Stand up, all victims and brave. For the tyrants be your mind. Don't cling so hard to your possession. You have nothing, you have no rights. Let raise this ignorance be ended. Respect to the empire's fall. Freedom is here, the privilege extended, unless you join my
How long do you want my speech to be? 10 minutes?
I'm thinking a couple hours. That's all right.
We're going to make 5 minutes.
We're going to just let a couple more people sit down and then we'll start. Yeah.
This is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to rise. Walls of hatred or walls of strife. Come we, the world stand beside us, live together for the right of love. Now world was my expectation.
I'll get some initially.
So is this the song?
Yeah.
So you did all, is this the mix you were playing?
No, this is just one song.
Oh.
I mean, I'm just playing one song. This is my iTunes, so it's lots of songs in it, but we're not playing all of them, just this one.
I just wanted to tell you, Noel's leaving in like
I know
20 minutes.
he's on right after.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you. He's going to get a chance to read God.
to New York, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I stayed at their house in Livingston. And she had all the cats then. I can remember getting up at night to go to the bathroom, and I got cats all around me. Well, what I got to give her credit for, I had a car in California. Everybody in California had a car. She gets up every morning. She walks down a hill, picks up a bus, goes over into New York City, walks to her place. I don't know how she did it, because I couldn't do it. But I got to give her a lot of credit, and we all miss her because she was such a great person. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be real brief. I'm Noel. I am Mickey's son, for those of you who knew Hilda's sister, Mickey. Lived right next door, grew up right next door to Hilda. And to piggyback on somewhat of what Brad mentioned, I don't want to tell stories because we'd be here forever and you're going to hear plenty. I just want to always be thankful to Hilda for instilling in her nieces and nephews and me personally bedrock values, family, responsibility, duty, and all the cultural exposure she gave us all, that I think made us who we are as adults, and hopefully we're trying to pass on to the next generation of Hessels. So I will always be thankful for her and miss her for all of that. She was the Sarge, and we'll miss her terribly. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Is there anyone else who needs to be leaving soon that wants to talk? Okay, well then we're going to kind of move along in order of more or less of seniority. And I thought I would start. It's been really several months now. The planet somehow has persisted in turning on its axis and revolving around the sun without the presence of Hilda Hessel Stark. And honestly, the dynamic Hilda that we all knew faded away almost completely over the last few years, although she remained characteristically cheerful and gracious right to the end. It's no shock that the laws of gravity and physics remain indifferent to her passing. But I have to admit, I'm a little surprised that civilization has at least so far survived so well without her, although looking at the 2016 US presidential campaign, some might say the jury's still out. Hilda was first and foremost a proponent of civilization. She faithfully believed in the capacity of humanity to figure out, implement, and maintain a social order reflecting a just and fair division of labor and wealth for everyone. And she was perfectly capable of explaining to anyone who would listen, from a philosophical, historical, economical, social, political perspective, whatever, how and why this was so, at whatever level of detail you were prepared to tolerate, or maybe one or two levels deeper than you really wanted to hear. But to me, what made her special was that, to an extent that's very rare, her personal behavior and her philosophical take on life were very strongly integrated. She was not a person who was content to just wrestle with an issue intellectually and reach a conclusion and then leave it at that. Once she was persuaded of the rectitude of whatever conclusion she attained, it was a matter of honor for her to determine the ramifications and proceed to implement them, not only in her own life and the lives of everyone around her, but to the point of feasibility, and occasionally beyond that, to the world overall. So when at a young age she determined that the various rules of observant Judaism amounted to so much hocus pocus, she fomented and led a revolt among the Hessel children against Hebrew school, bar mitzvahs, yarmulkes, any of the trappings. Her subversive campaign reached its triumphant apex 2 decades later with the institution of a Christmas tree and present exchanges in Morris and Toby's household around the happily coincidental dates of her brother's birthdays, December 24th for Lee, my father, and December 26th for Al, who you just heard from. By this, not on the same year, mind you. By this time, Hilda was decidedly a pinko, I think is the right term, and thus her anti-clerical instincts had extended to all those other opiates of the people as well. It wasn't just Judaism that was under fire. And being a pagan ritual, the Whitehall holiday tree must have felt like a double thumb in the eye victory for her, because it expressed disdain simultaneously for both traditional Judaism and Christianity, in her mind. But as relentless as her campaign of consciousness raising may have been, it also was conducted with such civility and respect that she lived most of her adult life under the same roof as her parents, who maintained a kosher kitchen their entire lives. Of course, it helped that after the death of Mrs. Kaufman, Hilda and Willie inherited the third-floor apartment, which had its own kitchen. And of course, starting after the war, Hilda worked at Hessel Furs, her father's business. So they really had to tolerate and respect each other, and that they did so was in no small part a function of Hilda's generosity of spirit, and probably her abiding faith that eventually, being relentlessly exposed to the light of truth, justice would eventually triumph in every human heart. I'm not sure she ever actually converted Morris and Toby, but she certainly never gave up. And speaking of light, a lot of light was shed in the daily car ride commute from Westchester into Manhattan. Morris, Hilda, Lee, Mickey, and a couple of times a week, Toby would all pile into the Hessel station wagon for the ride to Hessel Furs on 29th Street. As a kid, with interest both in books and history and also chess, all of which were better served in Manhattan than in Westchester County and Tarrytown, I would often hitch rides with them on Saturdays or summer weekdays when school was out. Okay, one quick diversion. When Milena attended kindergarten in Brooklyn, based on some standardized testing results or something, she was placed in one of 3 gifted and talented classes in our school district, which had 60,000 school-age children. So the thing is, when you take the 75 best testing kindergartners out of some 5,000 or so, whatever the number was, and put them together in 3 classrooms, you get sparks flying. It's not just that you might overhear a couple of uncharacteristic conversations discussing orbital decay or plant genealogy. It's almost the spooky realization that after spending some time in that classroom, you're surrounded by 24 little kids who are at least as smart, and many considerably smarter than you are. So car rides into Manhattan with Hilda, Lee, Mickey, Morris, and Toby were something like that kindergarten class. You were a bit in awe of the pure brain power, politics, religion, history, current events, sports, ballet, opera, astronomy, fashion design, engineering, archaeology, science fiction. The topics ranged far and wide. And the level of discussion was a kind of combustible mix of erudition and invective. Many times the heat generated rivaled or even exceeded the light, which is saying a lot because there was invariably considerable light. My father, as I mentioned at the grave site, was a Barry Goldwater Republican, and Hilda was a dedicated Marxist. So, and a peace activist, and the others generally lined up sort of in between somewhere. And in these discussions, Hilda would fight fair, which is to say she cited credible evidence to support her arguments, listened to what others had to say, conceded when they had a point, and consistently and sincerely stuck to her guns, which is more than I can say for my father, who was not above exaggerating his opinions to the edge of outrageousness just to see if he could drive Hilda to entertaining fits of exasperation, which Hilda was hip to his tricks, and he did not often succeed, but I believe that everyone else in that car was secretly rooting for him, as it was kind of fun to watch Hilda lose her cool and launch into full professorial attack mode. Which leads me to my last point. Hilda was a teacher. As I'm sure is the case with most kids, it was obvious to me early on that most adults had no clue whatsoever. Their value systems were at best sketchy and ill-considered, and more often seemingly non-existent, or at least totally ignored. They did have really useful life experience and skills, such as the ability to order a bottle of wine, which I couldn't do, or drive a car and get me someplace. That was good. But they generally weren't very smart, certainly not as smart as I was. And maddeningly, they had no clue how clueless they were. And beyond lacking respect for my opinions, they seemed oblivious of the possibility that I or any other kid might even have an opinion worth considering. Hilda was amazingly different. She was the first adult I met who treated me as a person who happened to be young rather than a kid. She genuinely listened to what I had to say, patiently explained when she disagreed, and asked pertinent Socratic style questions, not just to challenge me, but to help me address contradictions and holes in my arguments. Several people have commented to me that Hilda would have made a great teacher, and in point of fact, I think she actually was a great teacher, even though that was not her official profession. And any of you who had the opportunity to see her work with her business customers in the fur business can probably attest that her listening and teaching skills were put to good use there. So Hilda herself is gone, and the planet keeps turning, but perhaps humanity is collectively just a bit poorer for her absence. I take solace in the thought that we who knew her all have a great role model to keep in mind as we do our best to shoulder some of the weight that she carried and strive to do a bit better at engaging others, understanding and respecting their opinions, even if they're kids, and gently helping them to attain a higher level of consciousness. And I'd like to just read a couple of notes that were posted on the legacy.com site that Jillian, my sister, set up, and which I encourage all of you to go and visit. And if you feel moved to do so, add your own comments. This one is from Susan Silberman. December 4th, 2015. We had just arrived to this country in the early 60s from Argentina with a then baby in tow, quote unquote. They hired my late husband at their shop, and Hilda and her dear parents and sister Mickey used to invite us to their homes for holidays with such warmth. They all made us feel like family. Vivid memories indeed. We'll never forget them. Hilda was such a force among family and friends all over the world, and she honored us by coming from New York to Florida about 3 years ago for my younger son's wedding, and it was a treat. Mr. and Mrs. Carl Brackle very kindly helped her in this journey. My family and myself embraced you all, for this loss is all of our losses. Well, we love her dearly. Sincerely, Susan Silberman and family, Pembroke Pines, Florida. And here's one from Carl. Speaking of Carl, Hilda and Willie picked me up at Idlewild Airport when I arrived here in 1963. Ever since, Hilda has been a dear friend to me and now also to my wife and son. Hilda was gifted with a brilliant mind. She understood politics and economics like no other, and she loved arts and music and the theater. And most importantly, Hilda had a heart of gold. The number of people whose life she touched and whom she helped stretches from here to around the world and wherever she's been. Our heartfelt condolences to Hilda's family. And here is one from Friday, May 5th, just a couple of days ago. Hilda, my auntie, I will forever remember the love, support, and friendship. She gave me my first real job in 1983, encouraged me to go back to school, treated me as family, museums, luncheons, dinners, gardening. A person I wish all young people could have in their lives to guide them. Gail, Storm, Bryant, and family, Brooklyn, New York. So, that's all I have to say. Jillian, maybe you'd like to? Well, that's okay.
So I'm Brad's younger sister, and I guess the Hilda's eldest niece. So when it became evident a few years ago, Hilda had fallen very ill. She was still living in New Jersey. For those of you who are kind of surprised, our cousin Roz kind of went through Hilda's address book recently to let you know what had happened. But some of you knew she had come out to California with me about 3.5 years ago. And so I can speak to her last few years for those of you who had lost track and wanted to hear. But as Brad said, she really remained such a happy, positive person despite her onset of dementia. And I always feared that she would get angry at me for uprooting her from New York, because as you all know, no one said yet, but Hilda was a strident New Yorker. I always think of that classic New Yorker poster where there's just nothing west of the Mississippi, you know, and then there's maybe the Pacific Ocean somewhere out there. But she just, you know, she would visit California and just nothing was as good as the Metropolitan Opera or the the Met Museum. And I was kind of quaking in my boots to take her out of her element. And she never complained. She was always gracious and just upbeat about everything and appreciative of anyone who helped her. And I just was so happy that she didn't get angry at me for taking her away from her beloved New York. And she became my museum buddy. I kept telling her, you know, you're going to be my museum buddy in LA because I don't have anyone to go with. And we did. As she got more and more confused, we could actually go through the same corridor in the museum several times. And she said, we haven't seen that yet. But it was really funny because by the end, when she was wheelchair bound and I really couldn't get her anywhere because she couldn't get in and out of my car in the nursing home, I would take her out anyway because she always wanted to be out. She loved looking at the flowers, the trees, and LA is beautiful in that way. She would admire the architecture and tell me that she wished she had pursued architecture. At one time, she thought she was going to be an architect. I guess that got a little waylaid, but she did. It was really interesting because she was taking time travel at the end, and she really wanted to go back to Europe. Those of you who knew her, she was always talking about Europe, and so we have a little bit of her that didn't get buried today that we're going to take to Paris, I think, and release her off the Eiffel Tower or at the Louvre or somewhere. So anyway, I really miss her, and her spirit is definitely with me, that optimism and faith in the human race. And when Brad and I and my cousin Roz and my dad, who's since passed on, were helping try to clean up, I think, Emil, you even came once. We were trying to clean up Lafayette to get it on the market. What a nightmare. There were, how many cats?
There were at the peak 38.
38 cats. That she admitted to.
And that doesn't count the outside cats. It's just the inside cats.
Anyway, it was really something. But in going through Hilda's desk, I saved actually this yellow fool's cap legal pad list of her charitable contributions one year. And it wasn't a lot of money, but the list, you know, on the legal paper, it went all the way down. And there were, the one thing I want to say about her not being spiritual or religious is that I learned going back to Judaism as an adult, one of the reform rabbis out in Los Angeles had told me, you know, you don't have to believe in God to be a good Jew, because so much about being a good Jew is man's humanity to man and good ethics and moral compass and all the things that my cousin Noel spoke to. And Hilda had all of that and more. She marched in the civil rights demonstrations back in the 60s and the 70s, the People for Peace. She was just an activist all her life. And one of the things that we strive for as Jews is tikkun olam, to really make the world, repair the world and make it a better place. And that was Hilda's real goal. And so I know she's up there either watching the opera or marching for peace or something. And she got the sun out for us today. That was pretty much of a miracle. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Roz?
Well, Hilda's life was governed by several passions: a yearning for beauty, a commitment to family and friends, a quest for knowledge, and, as Jillian has said, an imperative to make the world a better place. From the time I was a tiny child, I admired this amazing lady who had been so many places and had been such a part of history. Hilda inspired me to become a professor and an internationalist. Now, for those of you who don't know, I am the great niece of Willie Stark. My father and Hilda and Willie had similar politics. You may gather what I mean by that. Now, I myself had a very difficult coming of age. And while I was going through my adolescent angst, I did not get along with my parents, which often happens. So I went to stay with Hilda and Willie for a time. Unlike many people in my family, Hilda was certain that I would get past my personal demons and do something productive. She was right. So I like to say that I am one of her rescue animals, even though I am a biped. Hilda's compassion extended to a variety of situations. It took her overseas to fight fascism. It led her to support unpopular causes, as Jillian says, and it caused her to take meticulous care of my uncle. And while we all loved him in my family, he would not have been the easiest person to be married to. Yet she always said certain things are owed to a human being, and she had the deepest respect for the things he did that were good and the things that he did that were right. So I knew what she meant to me, and I knew what she meant to the family, but it was only recently, after her death, that I really understood the full impact of Hilda's life and the effect she had around them, the effect she had on those around her. When someone dies, and especially if they don't have kids, there's a lot left to do. And Jillian and Lori and Brad and just lots of people had to get involved in doing the many things that had to be done. I volunteered for the address book, and the address book was kept in Hilda's in Hilda's purse, and if you knew her, you may have seen it with the cover falling off it and the some of the spiral pages just rubber banded. And now Jillian had made an attempt to copy everything, and she did it very well. But of course, anyone would have given up after going through that thing. And so I was making calls, and some of them were non-working numbers, and some of the people were ill. And when I would call people, they would say, "Oh, Hilda has died? Oh," and they'd say, "She was the most wonderful person I ever knew." And this woman did not have employees. She did not have coworkers. She did not have clients. She had friends. She had fellow human beings. And she infected us all with her warmth and her joie de vivre and her personal magnetism. And so she reached far beyond the family. She affected, as I say, so many people. And that's why there's such a crowd here. And before I finish, where do we all come from? Where do we live now?
California.
Oregon.
Virginia.
San Francisco.
Chicago.
Atlanta, Georgia. Brooklyn, New York.
Okay, and we've gathered here to acknowledge the life of this magnificent person. So I'm going to close with a poem by Stephen Spender, The Truly Great. I'm not going to read it all because it's long and others want to speak, but if you want it afterwards, I will I will send it to you. The truly great. I think continually of those who were truly great, whose lovely ambition was that their lips, still touched with fire, should tell of the Spirit, clothed from head to foot in song. What is precious is never to forget the essential delight of blood drawn from ageless springs, never to allow the traffic to gradually smother with noise and fog the flowering of the Spirit. See how these names are feted by the waving graphs, the names of those who in their lives fought for life, who wore at their hearts the fire's center. Born of the sun, they traveled a short while toward the sun and left the vivid air signed with their honor. Hilda Hessel Stark, thank you for living.
Hi, my name's Emil, and I was like Brad's best friend growing up, and we sort of had a bit of a schism when he went off to private school, but we've since resolved that. I can remember meeting Hilda when Brad and I were reviewing a history project. He says, "You got to meet my aunt," and she's up to her elbows in horse shit because they're gardening in the back of Whitehall. And I said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, my parents are from Trieste." I said, "Oh, that's Austria. We're almost like family." And from that day forward, it was like family, I can remember, I really got to know Hilda from about 2000 forward. And especially I got to know her very well in LA. And I'll tell you some secrets from LA as well. But I can remember, I always wondered why this really intelligent woman worked in a fur shop. I just didn't get it. And in 78, I think I went there with a friend. We were walking down Manhattan, and there's Hessel Fur. I said, "I got to go in." And I saw Hilda there with this enormous woman in front of her who was pretty unattractive, but she had a beautiful fur on. I mean, it was a magnificent fur. And Mickey was there almost like, trying not to laugh, because it was like she's rolling her eyes. And Hilda laid on such a schmooze. It's like, I said, it was the ultimate salesperson. This woman, this enormous, unattractive woman was in that moment beautiful in front of Hilda. And it was an amazing transformation to see. So I knew after that why she was in the fur business. I said, I got to know Hilda. The first time I think she did the nephew thing on me is about 2004 or 5. I was in Jersey. She says, "Gotta go to this diner." I said, "Where's this diner?" God knows how we got there. She gave me directions. It's like, and she sat me down and she said, "They got great Belgian waffles." Okay, fine. Now she didn't eat one. She was going to buy one for me, so I was feeling like 12 years old. And it came out, it had like probably 3,000 calories of sugar, right? So like I'm like picking at this thing because I border on lactose intolerance, and I ate about a half of it, and she looked at me disapprovingly. She says, "That's it?" So I got the auntie treatment as well. Skipping forward to LA, you all sort of worried about her maybe connection to the divine, but a couple of times when I took her to LA County Museum of Art or other places, she would look at artwork, and there was a reverence and a silence and a connection to something that I've seen like little old ladies do when they go to a cathedral in Europe. And for her, that was her access to the divine. I was completely convinced of it. It was something very beautiful to watch, and it was a real pleasure to take her to the museums. Jillian mentioned going to the same corridor in LA, Museum of Art. And once she did that to me, I said, we actually went through a lot of the museums. She said, "Let's go in here again." So I wheel her in, and there it was. She started saying different things about every painting. Like she didn't remember she was in that corridor, but she made a different commentary, which I thought was remarkable, you know? Lastly, I one day, a couple of years ago, we were coming up from LA and I said, I'm going to take, Hilda to someplace she doesn't know about. So we went to the Getty Villa, and they had art from Greek art from Sicily, 2600 BC. And I said, I'm going to stump her on this. She's, and we get in, and damn it, there she goes. This guy came from Greece, and he did this, and the mosaic. It was just remarkable. I've never met anybody like that. The things that I really took, it's been touched on here about Hilda is. One side of her was actually very private and a little protective of herself. When she really let loose, she was like, she talked a lot about World War II and how exciting that was, how proud she was of how the Americans tried all these, quote, as she puts them, son of a bitches. And she said that really helped reestablish democracy, is those trials in Nuremberg. But I'll leave you with this story because it was one of those very, very delicate moments. We were driving back from the museum. Actually, I'm going to preface this. Jillian, I conspired against you. When you first brought Hilda in, she says, I don't like it here. It's like, I said, but you don't have palm trees in Manhattan. Yeah, it's nice. And it's cold now. Come on, it's December. It's freaking 70 degrees. And Jillian needs you here. Yeah, maybe you're right. Jillian needs me here. So that's what I sold her on. And I think that was that connection to family that we've all talked about. So she felt very comfortable being Jillian's auntie. But the last story I'll share you was pretty dramatic for me. It's like we're driving along in LA, which is very busy. And she was talking very excitedly about being 20 in Oxford. And then she slipped out and says, and who knows, this dyke would end up in Oxford. And I'm like driving, like, and she's next to me saying, and then we never mentioned it again, but stuff would pop out of her, so she was really an amazing woman in so many ways. But I was really blessed to have known her, and I'm happy that I got included in the whole family. So thank you. And just from an official point of view, the judge before he left says, Emil, you're part of the family. And I figure if a judge tells you you're part of the family, that's it. So thank you.
I had so many last names, I'm not sure which one to give. I'm Gail. I met Hilda in 1983. I was 21, 54 now. Woo. First, I'm really thankful that you took the time to go through that book, because a lot of times I would call where she was living at the residence and she would not answer. So either she was resting or she wasn't in the room. And
She was at a museum.
At a museum, which I had privilege of going to many of them, as well as my children went along. She was such a loving, supportive, mentoring person. She wanted the best for you. And I'll remember her telling me that I had to go back to school. I had no choice when I started working for her. I got there from a temp agency, and I worked for them for one whole day because she said, no, you're not going back to that. You're staying here with me. She taught me bookkeeping. I learned about the Fair District. And then she said, well, what do you really want to do? I said, I want to be a veterinarian. I've already done about 5 years of school in that. She said, well, have you thought about taking care of people? Because she was the first one who told me about animals not technically having souls in that manner. She told me about all the cats. So when I met all the cats, I'm like, are you sure they have no souls? Because you got a lot of them here. Obviously, something's going on here. And she said, no, I think you'd be better taking care of people. And then she took me home with her to help her care for Willie. And I loved the house out in Tarrytown. And it just was so warming and inviting that she would just open her heart like that. And little to her or my knowledge, I was expecting my first child, and he is now 32 and a performer. And I remember us going out, and she decided she was going to teach him how to garden. That was real interesting. Little kids want to play in the dirt, all right. I don't know about the flowers, but she never gave up on me. She said, no, you're going back to school. You're going back to school. So I listened, and I left her only to start my job at the hospital as a nursing assistant. And that hospital happened to be the hospital I was born in, and they had a nursing school. So I was able to do everything in one place, go to school and work. And it was just so encouraging from her. She'd call, well, how's it going? How's your homework? How are you speaking correctly? She was good at that. She would correct me all the time. She didn't care what was going on, who was around, and I had no problem with it, because it's important to be able to speak eloquently. I'm still working on it. But it was just such a wonderful trip with her. Going to museums, going out to eat. I learned about so many different cultures, restaurants, different things that she liked to do. The opera, okay. After a while, you get used to it, you understand what they're saying. It was beautiful, but she just loved the arts. She really loved the arts, which surprised me, because my daughter wound up in the High School for Art and Design, photography, architect, and now she's doing culinary arts. Instead, she's cooking, and she graduated, so Hilda would have been ecstatic about that. I had to really laugh. My first award that I got as a nurse, she wasn't able to make it, but she made sure to send someone. And I just thought that was so amazing of her to go to that length for me. She showed me nothing but love and kindness. She took us out all the time. We go out for our birthdays. Mine is at January 28th and hers is February 27th. So we always celebrated that. I love the cat room. The cat had their own room, all the little tiers and things that she would build for them to climb and places for them to hide. There'll never be another like her. And as I said, I am just so grateful that you took the time to reach out to those who love her. I had asked about so many different people that I hadn't seen in a while. Noel probably doesn't remember me. I haven't seen Liz in a while, and I know that Mildred, she had passed away. So I tried to keep in touch with everybody the best that we could. We grow up and we go our way and we do different things, but it's nothing like such a loving family, and even the different dinners and outings that we had with the family was there. Classical music. I have learned about so many things. I could go on and on and on. She was just nothing but knowledge and peace. Very peaceful. I'm gonna tell one last story. I remember her waiting for me at the museum, and I walked up with my cane, and she says to me, now, she sometimes stood like this. Yeah. So she looked up, she said, I'll get the wheelchair when we get inside of the museum, and I'll push you. I looked at the cane, and as you see, there is no cane. No, that's not happening. I had to get rid of the cane. I said, how am I going to let her take care of me? I'm supposed to be here for her, but she didn't care. She was willing. We didn't get the wheelchair, thank God, but she was willing. So we'll all keep her forever in our hearts, and we'll always have stories. I have such beautiful pictures with her, with all of my family, my husband, my kids. It's just, she will be missed, definitely. So thank you for letting us share this with you. Really appreciate it. God bless. It was you. Yes, bless you. Bless you. Thank you. All right. Okay.
I don't know which one of these to look into. Which one?
That's the one.
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to do what Hilda told me not to do. Because although I've been acting, not professionally, I do not like preparing. I do everything spontaneously, and there are good reasons not to. And when I thought about what I could prepare to say about Hilda, as long as she was conscious and around, I mean, it's a 50-year relationship. I'll tell quickly how I met her because everybody asks. Because Hilda treated me like I was on a pedestal. She treated me like a guest all the time. So I used to pretend I was privileged. Anyway, see, this is what happens. I don't know how to put these many years into context. Brad did most of it for me already. And as each person came up, they said something else. And I do remember Gail. I went to some graduation she had years ago, and this is the first time I'm seeing her since. All of her stories are familiar. All of her family's familiar because I spent many weekends at Whitehall and Passaic listening. I even know the name of her favorite cat, Grafer. I don't know if anybody else has heard about Grafer, but Grafer was my little favorite cat who used to hug my feet and then smack me and run away. The political connection was, I thought like she did. I was naturally like she was in my thinking, and she helped put it in context. The only story that I think that I was amazed by was the time she and a group of her friends saved Paul Robeson from a terrible happening upstate New York. Many people would know about it because at the time it really was publicized, but she described it as grabbing him, putting him down in the car and sneaking away from that awful group. And I was amazed at that. So I heard a lot about her political activities, her social activities, and the ones I liked best was when she was in the war. My question, I'm about 10 years younger than Hilda, a little less maybe. I admit to a little less. Anyway, the last part was going to all of these museums. I see she did it with everybody. And the way she would do it with me is, Lorraine, I have somebody I want you to meet, and we're going to meet at such and such a museum. And I never had an idea of who it was and the diversity, the different people. They were wonderful. And I met many, many of her friends. And they would all say, how do you know Hilda? Same way you do, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, see, this is why I shouldn't ad-lib. Anyway, I just wanted to say the fun part of her was we had an argument every time we met in the later years. She used to call herself and everybody else old goats. And she would say, oh, that's an old goat, or I'm an old goat. You're not, she's not, I'm not. None of us are goats. So I thought maybe this was her favorite animal. But I know better, it was cats. And so anyway, I had a lot of fun with Hilda. I learned a lot, and she appreciated my son's brilliance, and he used to send her beautiful combinations of music. He was a music student, graduated with music, and then ended up going for law to make a living. And to do that these days is a joke. Well, that's another story. In any case, my granddaughter who's here used to go accompany us old goats to the museum from the time she was 9. I won't say how old she is because she doesn't look it, but she's doing well, and I'm so proud of her. But it's just been a wonderful life. And I would say, percentage-wise, a large percentage of it was great because of my relationship with Hilda. So when the old goat went to Los Angeles and stayed in this wonderful place that Jillian found, I spoke to Jillian out there that time, and then spoke to her as long as she would answer the phone. There were many times when she didn't. And if she was at the museum, I'm glad. But she told me about the terrace and the sunset and all of those wonderful things. But the last time I spoke to her, she said, Lorraine, I've decided to give up the fur business. And then I knew. She also didn't remember much of my son. Oh, yes, 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 I remember. She also felt that she was still in New York. So I cried then, not now. Now I'm pleased because I've seen today many of you whom I've seen before, because I used to spend Hanukkah, Christmas many times out at Whitehall. And to tell you how I actually met her, my youngest son, who's 62, is now, when he was 12, I was a sales manager working strictly on commission and training people. World Book Encyclopedia. I'm proud of that. I love that company. Anyway, and I love what they produce. I needed a rest from running out knocking on doors. So I followed an ad for the 29th Street fur business for the storage. And it was then that I met her, and we found that we actually grew up in the same neighborhood, Elmsford, and went to the same school. And the Spadatias were my sister's teacher. I commuted to New York for schooling, but we had so much in common in terms of that geographical connection. And that's it. But I do miss her, the old goat.
Hi, I'm Lorraine's granddaughter. I just wanted to say that I'm very grateful for Hilda's life as well. I do remember going to the museum as a child with my grandma, and I've been hanging out with her for years. And hanging out with Hilda was a nice time too. I remember, you know, you're so little and you're with these older ladies, but I had such a great time. And I'm just so grateful that she was such a good friend to my grandma. So I had a wonderful family member and friend. Thank you.
Thank you, darling. I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for speaking.
Hello, excuse me. My name is Alice Essing, and I'd also like to introduce my friend Lottie Zuba in the back. Sit up, wave. I was introduced to Hilda by Lottie back in 1991. Lottie and I had met a year earlier at a candlelight vigil for homeless animals. She had asked me to help her with TNR, which is trap, neuter, release, with the large overpopulation problem in Passaic of cats. And anyway, one day I'm setting up traps and in Hilda's neighborhood, and actually right around the front of her house. And I see this woman walking up Lafayette Avenue, and she's frowning, had a very disgruntled look on her face. And when she gets over to me, she demands to know, what the hell are you doing? Well, with that, Lottie turns around. Oh, by the way, Hilda, this is Alice. She does TNR. Well, with that, within seconds, Hilda's demeanor, her facial expression changed. I could see that, you know, it was going to be a good thing after following that. But anyway, with that, we started discussing the problem, and Hilda invited me in for a cup of tea. And then, of course, a stroll through her garden. She wanted to show me her tulips and her compost and how she makes it and so on and so forth. And we clicked. And anyway, in many ways, Hilda impressed me that she was a tough old Army girl. Yet I realized early on that she was a great humanitarian under that tough exterior. A great humanitarian. She was always working on causes. And like Jill said, her list of people in her will was long. She was one of the most intriguing, interesting, and intelligent persons I had ever met. She was also both a great talker and a great listener. I valued her advice tremendously, and I often looked to her for a second opinion. Over the years, Hilda, Lottie, and I became extremely close. Actually, it went beyond friendship. We truly loved her, and I know we all felt like family. As a matter of fact, we'd say that very often. We always looked forward to our weekly dining out at the TikTok Diner or the Lexington Diner or Sunday breakfast at the Nutley Diner. Very often that would include Martha. Looking back, Lottie and myself have so many fond and funny memories, too many to mention. As a matter of fact, a lot of things were mentioned. One of the things that I always found to be humorous was how after the holidays would take down the Christmas tree and I'd say, well, we've got to get a bag to put it in. You know, it was predominantly religious Jewish people. Oh, no, I don't care what those characters think. Put it out there, put it at the end of the driveway. But she was a character, and I truly miss her, and I love her. To this day, she's with me. I feel her spirit. Oh,
thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ellie Hessel. I'm Brad's daughter and Hilda's great grandniece, or I don't even know how that works. Something like that. But like my dad said, I think it is really fitting that today is Mother's Day and that we're doing the celebration of Hilda's life today. Because my grandmother, my dad's mom, passed away long before I was born. And so Hilda really was my grandmother on my dad's side of the family. She's the one who came to all my graduations. She, not with much verbal protest, came to my bat mitzvah. And I think the same is true for my siblings. And, I was always I loved calling her and talking to her on the phone every time I talked to her. Even, less than a year ago was a nice history lesson, both personal and broadly. And even after she no longer really remembered where she was now, it's really fun to call. I would ask about how various people in the family were doing and learn about people I'd never met, like my great-grandparents, because to her they were alive and well, and she would tell stories about them. And I really enjoyed that, hearing about everyone in my family. And Jillian sent me a bunch of papers and pictures of Hilda's after she passed away. So I now have her high school diploma and her college diploma. I have some correspondence between her and different universities, lots of random pictures. So if anybody wants to look at them and identify people for me. But I've really enjoyed kind of getting to know more about her. That, I think every time I talked to Hilda, I heard a new story that I'd never heard before. And it was nice getting that, because I felt like I got more stories even after she had passed. And she was always an inspiration in terms of, doing something that meant something with your life. She, whatever you did, she thought it meant something, and she would tell you, and would also tell you how to take it a step further and do something even more. So she not only was, I think, an inspiration, but she seemed to take inspiration from everyone she met and everything she saw. And I think that's reflected in the fact that everybody is here today, and everyone's memories of her, and I'll miss her. So thank you.
Go around this way. There's a wire here.
Oh, okay. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gina Tlamsa, and before I forget, there was actually a YouTube with Hilda in it. I may forget it, in the motion of this whatever I say here. But if anybody, I'm going to send the information to Jillian. And Hilda loved music, as you know. I'm a musician and a performer, and she actually came to see my rock band about 5 years ago in Harlem. She got on the bus, got on the train, came up to Harlem, and she's some tourist was just walking around very informally with their phone and made a YouTube. It's terrible sound. The sound quality is no good, but Hilda's actually sitting at one of the tables, and you might enjoy seeing it because there's all Sid Bernstein was there too because he liked our group. That's Sid Bernstein who brought the Beatles over. So here's Sid and here's Hilda. But I get such a kick out of it. I didn't realize she was in any way. My mother, Rita Crean Tlamsa, a young girl from the Bronx, decided to join the Army at the beginning of World War II, and patriotic fervor, and she also wanted to see the world and get out of New York City. So she joined the Women's Army Corps, and there she met Hilda and two New York girls, and they were in boot camp together, and they went to boot camp down south, and they went to Europe, and were in the Army together. They got all kinds of medals. They were very brave people. My mother had a lot. Today's Mother's Day. My mother died 12 years ago. And those ladies really had a lot of moxie. They were very courageous. And Hilda told me a story I'd like to share with you. I'm a little emotional about it, but it makes me laugh every time I think about it because my mother never told me this story. They were in station near Monte Carlo they were both sergeants, by the way, and the wax. And they were not, Monte Carlo was you were not supposed to go there if you were GI. Off limits. So both Hilda and my mother decided they want to go to Monte Carlo regardless of whether it's off limits or on limits. So they got off the base, they made a plan, they got off the base, and they wore their Army uniforms, but they brought their civilian clothes with them. They had dresses and shoes and, nice things to wear. And they got to Monte Carlo, and they went behind some bushes and changed. And then they walked right up to the gates of Monte Carlo. And these, this was during World War II, and it was no joke. And, you could get into a lot of trouble, but they wanted to go. And they decided my mother had better French, so she would speak to the people at the gate. And they get in, no problem, right? So they get to the gate, and the guy says, "No, you can't come in." And my mother said, "Why? How are you saying in French? Why not?" He goes, "You're not French." And he knew they were Army. And my mother said, "Well, okay, we're not. But how did you know we're not?" He goes, "French girls don't walk like that." Because they had that New York 24-inch stride that they walked up to. Then he knew just watching them but he let them in anyway. And I love that story. Yeah, Mom, yeah, Hilda. So I remember Hilda as a little girl. My brothers and I would go up and visit in Tarrytown here with Mom, and Hilda remained friends, although they didn't see each other then. My mother had children, she worked, and she went to school. But they always exchanged. I always thought it was so cute that Hilda sent Christmas cards because my mother said, she's an atheist, and we were Catholic. So I thought that was great that, an atheist, once I understood what that meant, would send Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays, it said Merry Christmas. And then my mother also became more and more conservative, and Hilda was very to the left, which is where I more stand, where Hilda was. And but I realized my mother and Hilda were still friends, regardless of the political differences. And when I understood she had very left leanings, and I thought that was amazing that was a good example, in other words, to see that people with two very different opinions, because my mother and I fought a lot about those things. And I saw that she was friends. Also, Hilda, I don't know if anybody knows this, but she helped build Pete Seeger's house in Beacon Mountain. The Burnses were friends of hers, Harold and Ruth Burns. I never knew them, but I know their son, David, who's a musician also. And she helped them carry rocks up the hill to build Pete Seeger's big house on the mountain. I love that. I remember the visits and also the Nuremberg trial. Somebody mentioned Nuremberg. Hilda told me later on that the reason she stayed in Europe, she wanted to go home, but her supervisors wanted her to stay, the officers she worked for. And she said, the only way I'll stay, because she wanted to get back to New York, the only way I'll stay if you let me have a ticket to the Nuremberg trials. And she got it. She got to watch them because she wanted to see what happened, and she did. And she was great. And I'm also an animal activist and a political activist. And like Alice mentioned about the TNR, I do that too. So we had a lot of things in common. She gave me a Rose of Sharon tree. And the one survived. I call it Hilda. I planted it. It's doing really good. So thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, for what you said. I was really I'm enjoying hearing all of it. Thank you. Okay.
Well, if there's no one else who wants to talk to the group, you're welcome to keep talking to each other for another few minutes. I think we have until 3 o'clock, so we have another 15 minutes before we're supposed to start moving out. So thank you again all for coming, and on behalf of the family, if you're not full, please take more food. We've got more than we're all going, like far away, so we can't take it with us. So please help yourself.